So telling Lauren we're right by the lake so we can see folks who are outside swimming and having fun while we're at work. So it's a little hard today to be at work.
That's painful.
Hi, everyone. This is Ashley Darcy Mahoney from George Washington University.
Hi, Ashley. Welcome.
Hi, this is Erin Goss from Montefiore Medical Center.
Hi, Erin. Welcome.
Hello, this is Sarah.
Hey, Sarah. Welcome.
Thank you. How are you? You there?
Can you hear me?
Somewhat. Yeah, you're breaking up just a little bit, but otherwise okay.
We're going to give folks a couple more minutes, and we'll start around 2:05.
Okay, sure.
Hello?
Hello. Welcome. Who's this?
This is Susan Hasty at Hennepin County in Minneapolis.
Hi, Susan. Welcome.
Hi, Susan.
Thank
This
you.
is Sarah Tarek from our University of Arkansas.
Okay.
We're giving folks a couple more minutes, and then we'll get started. We have on the line Claire. Lauren is here with me, Anna Layla, Elizabeth, Ashley, Erin, and Sarah.
Okay.
Hi, are you all still there?
Uh-huh.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Sorry.
We lost you for a second. So why don't we go ahead and get started? We're going to start off with just going through the agenda with a member check-in to see how everyone's doing. Any exciting updates, kudos. It was great to see a good number of people over back in May at the conference, and so wanted to see how everyone was doing.
You want to call on people on the phone so we know?
No, feel free to just chime in.
It might be easier to be called on just because we can't see anything. But anyway, I'm on. So this is Susan Hasty at Hennepin. I very much enjoyed the conference. Since that time, I've been very busy, but the curriculum, I'm involved in the curriculum review group, and that's been going quite well. We have over 100 things uploaded.
Great.
And now we're looking at...
Hello, this is Mamuna.
Hi, Mamuna.
There's probably other people
Hi, Mamuna.
on this call who are on that.
We're
looking at... Yeah, the education question. So we're looking at putting sort of a philosophy statement on the front page, sort of maybe a user guide is a good way of how do you develop curriculum, what kind of things you need to think about, checklists. We have a couple good checklists as people develop curricula. to think about, are they putting in biases they may not have thought of earlier? So it feels like good work.
That's great. Feel free to share that resource in the website with your colleagues and all those you meet. Great, thank you. Ashley, Erin, Sarah, sorry, Mamuna, and Alayla. Any updates? Everyone's doing okay?
Yep.
Felice is also here.
Oh, great,
Hi,
Felice. This is Sarah. I'm doing something pretty cool. We've had a lot of turnover in terms of faculty members taking over our curriculum and doing different parts of practice of medicine. The majority of our social determinants of health curriculum is really housed in practice of medicine 1, 2, and 3 across the first 3 years. And so we now have a group of 3 people, including myself, who are really going to be looking longitudinally at the curriculum and putting that together. And for the first time, really looking at it sort of a thread, creating a longitudinal thread throughout the curriculum and seeing how one element builds on the other. So, and we should hopefully have something done by July, August. So that's pretty exciting.
Oh, that's exciting. Please share when you do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that should go on the collection website.
Absolutely.
Great.
This is Ashley. I think the only big thing I have to share is that the National League for Nursing put out a statement on incorporating social determinants of health and nursing curriculum. I'll send that around, but I think it's appropriate, and I sort of linked a lot of people towards your website to really think about how to do that, since now there's sort of a call from an accrediting body to do it.
That's great. There's lots of momentum amongst everyone, right? Medicine, nursing, even some pharmacists here at my institution are interested in this, so that's great.
And psychologists. This is Elizabeth from Cleveland.
And psychologists, awesome.
We're kind of designing a new curriculum for an interdisciplinary group of residents. And so I've been directing people back to you guys and then also kind of considering how we're going to implement this. So it's pretty exciting.
That's exciting. Thanks for sharing.
This is Felice. So it's still a work in progress, but I can tell you that, so one of the people, Helena Hansen from NYU, that I found in preparing the workshop that I did at the conference, we've invited her to come and do faculty development for all of our doctoring course faculty on structural determinants of health. And we have a new ICM teaching elective that involves a scholarly project, and the students, and we've created a list of topics, and one of the things that we hope the students will want to work on is basically to review educational materials from our course and others and screen them essentially for issues of bias or, and make suggestions for where things can be improved with regard to social determinants of health.
That's great. I love that you're involving the students in that aspect. And I want to put in a plug for you to consider doing a webinar with Helena on the faculty development sessions you're doing. We'll reach out more one-on-one. That'll be an exciting webinar. I think many people are interested in the faculty development aspect. Great.
This is Anna Lila Williams from Connecticut, and we have just been approved for co-curricular health equity lecture and workshop series. So we'll have 7 national leaders come in for a lecture series, and also 7 grassroots folks come in to talk about using advocacy as a means of achieving equity.
That's great. Exciting that you're involving the grassroots folks. I remember one of the things we shared at the conference was, not about us without us. I forget what the term was, but truly we can't do this without involving the community. So kudos to you. Okay, all very exciting things. Thank you guys for sharing. I'm going to move on to number 2, just housekeeping issues and updates. We had a Twitter chat today about an hour or 2 ago. A little light on attendance, figuring that it's the noon hour and might not work for most people, but we definitely encourage as many as can return at 8. We'll continue the conversation on Twitter at 8 p.m. So it's just hashtag NC's chat is a hashtag to think about. And it's all about interprofessional care and addressing social needs of our patients. Stipend updates.
So Claire, I know you're on the line, so feel free to interrupt me. But as far as I understand, payments have been processed. And so if you haven't received your payment yet, it should be on the way soon. If you're having any issues, that's okay, great. Claire, I don't know if you have anything else you want to add to that.
No, thanks. Back and forth. It was a little. So thank you for your patience, but everything has been. It's in with our accounts payable being it's either processed or you should have used it by now.
Did everyone get that? You're breaking up a little bit, Claire.
Sorry. So you all for all your patience with this and the back and forth with signing all the documents, but everything has been entered in our system, and so you either should have received your honorarium or it's in the process of receiving it, and you'll receive it soon. Sorry, my phone's not the best in my house. Did you hear me?
I heard it. Thank you.
Any questions about the stipend or any concerns?
No, just thank you for doing that.
You're welcome.
Okay. So the new fiscal year actually starts in July. July, August is when it truly starts. I know we as a community of practice didn't really kick things off until December at our first quarterly phone meeting. And we've been working over the course of the past 6-7 months. So I realized that some of the roles will bleed into December. I know the sign-ups run all the way through December, but that is primarily for the initial year. This second year is starting off, and we're thinking of role sign-up, and it will lead into the next item agenda, which is talking about the debrief. And the major project we're thinking about, we are actually doing, not thinking about, and how that's going to come into play with the roles that you will think about signing up for. If you want to consider joining into the guidelines development or doing other things such as research or the other roles, including webinars, as well as blogs and the rest. And so I will direct you to the slides I sent by email about an hour ago, and it essentially just summarizes the discussion we had. I'm going to run through it and then open up for folks to chime in and add whatever it is I forgot in the really great discussion we had. But just because I can't see people and won't be able to call in people, if you could just wait until, write down your thoughts as I'm talking, but then I will open up for comments and questions towards the end. So the first 6 slides essentially are just the project overview, as well as deciding whether or not we're doing guidelines or best practices, and that leads into the brainstorming we did. The first question in the brainstorming session was developing a shared mental model and what is the actual need that we have as educators in teaching social determinants of health. How is the COP uniquely positioned to meet this need? What is our goal? Who's our audience? Are we looking at undergraduate? Are we looking at graduate? Are we looking at faculty development? Is the focus, we realize this definitely needs to be interprofessional. Do we start off small and tackle the medical learners or the nursing learners? Do we do all groups at once, or do we do it in phases? The next slide, which is slide 7, was the second brainstorming session, and it was addressing what's the most effective way to achieve these goals? What's the structure we should have in place? What's the process, including a timeline? And then how do we hold ourselves accountable? And then slide 8 is a summary of what the different groups during the session came up with. And one of the questions, it was a question to our question, was, should it truly be a singular focus, or should it be multiple goals in phases? Now, realizing that the grant has a total of 5 years, and we are starting this July, we're starting year 4, so we potentially could have an additional year of funding. So maybe we should think big. Maybe we should start off with guidelines, but then also think about in subsequent years looking at assessment outcomes, program evaluations, and the rest. The needs we identified were that we need to make sure our institutions are aligned and there is prioritization and support for work like this. And so looking at the mission statements for all those different institutions, does it include a commitment to address social determinants of health, to advance health equity? We definitely need qualified faculty as well as faculty development in this area, and we need adequate time for faculty to engage in this work. In terms of slide 9 is in terms of the COP role, we thought that we were uniquely positioned to develop practice roles to supplement or support the work that the National Academies is already doing in this area. We raised the question of how do we package the topics and how do we help scale it to resources available, realizing that different institutions have different resources they can use in this area. We thought it was important to focus on the clinical application and not so much research at this time, and also to include an approach to the doubting learner. We definitely know that we have some of these learners, and how can we include them and involve them in this important work. We thought that the best structure would be to create subgroups within our COP to tackle different areas, and some of the subgroups mentioned were a group looking at needs assessment, another looking at methods, educational strategies, another looking at outcomes, and another looking at evaluation. And all this, if you, as educators, I know it sounds really similar to what Kearns did in a 6-step, and so maybe we should have just rounded out by having 2 other subgroups looking at goals and objectives as well as implementation. And then on the right bottom corner, I included the National Academies framework, which looks at the community, the organization, and education right there. So another framework to consider as we structure our subgroups. And then slide 10 was the actual implementation. And so ideas we shared were to develop a series of goals and identify our aims, to partner with organizational, educational leaders such as AAMC, if we're looking at the medical school setting, as well as other interprofessional leader organizations. To consider modeling it based on the AAMC social science framework, which is on the next slide. And to think about an incremental approach as we come up with these guidelines. So it's not just a one-size-fits-all, but maybe, at the beginning, this is just the foundational knowledge you need, and then presenting it as an incremental approach in the education aspect. The resource we develop needs to be adaptive depending on the resources available, which is the next point. And then to ensure that we're including how to create community collaborations and developing frameworks to choose from. So slides 11 and 12 are just shots from the AAMC guideline on the social science behavioral framework, behavioral and social science and medicine frameworks. And then the next 2 slides, slides 13 and 14, were provided by Megan, and she came up with this right after the conference and shared it with me, and I thought it was great and wanted to share it with the group. But it looks like the building blocks of social determinants of health education, so the foundational aspect on the bottom, and then the practice level, community and policy level, and then possible teaching methods we can apply at all the different levels that she outlined. And I know we're all doing some or all of this, and it was nice to see it just laid out visually in this framework. And so before I go on to next steps and tentative schedule, I wanted to open up for people to chime in about, some thoughts and ideas I might have left out or forgotten. It's been about a month and a half, so I couldn't remember everything that was shared. Other ideas or questions or concerns that have come up as you review these slides, and then we'll share what you feel we should have as next steps. So I'm going to open it up. Feel free to chime in. I know that I don't always like being called upon, so I'm not going to call on people, but I'd love to hear from anyone who is open to sharing.
This is Mamuna. I'm happy to say a few words. So first of all, thank you so much for taking, all the discussion ideas and materials and crystallizing them in some kind of summary, which is very, very helpful. I think that this is great that there is an intentional approach, I think, from the group to think of, what is our focus, what are next steps, and to think of an incremental building block kind of an approach, like what is the most low-hanging fruit, what can we do first, what can we do next, and also thanks for reminding us that, your grant is probably, at least there for another 2 years, but the thing for our group is to consider, what is achievable in these 2 years, and then what's next. So I really like the idea of coming up with the curriculum guidelines and also publishing that. So that's the first step. And even that step is kind of a big step. I also like the fact that, we are anchoring this within the larger movements in this area nationally and making our work congruent with the other national organizations. And one other specific thing that I wanted to point out was this, under the NCAS COP role, you mentioned the approach to doubting learner. So that is a critically important thing because no matter what kind of educational programming that we develop, anything that is not the hardcore, content of the science-based physiology, pathology, or anything else that's related to training the health professions, if it's something else which is considered the soft science or whatever you call it, there's always a group of people who are very skeptical and who are, I like that term, doubting, but I will extend that to say people who are even uncomfortable. So I think addressing those learners is important. So overall, my first reaction to all of this is that this is thoughtful, it's intentional, and we need to be mindful of, what we can achieve and what may in a given timeline. And the last thing I will say is that, at least in my experience, whatever we plan to do and we think it will take 1 year, it always takes like twice or thrice the time. So, yeah, that's just a lesson I've learned in life. So just sharing some thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Susan. On a practical question, first of all, I really like the schematic. So for Megan, thank you. That's nice. But I'm going back to the slide with the implementation. And I'm thinking about, in a practical way, how do we actually finish this project or get it started? Being somebody who always has to call in, it seems to me there needs to be some sort of leadership with a little core group that actually get to see each other in the hallways and bump into each other, being the drivers and the assignment givers. So, because it's hard to do that when you're one of the outliers. So on a practical way, if we got a sense of which people are interested in each of these structural areas, the needs assessment versus the methods versus the outcomes, evaluations, etc. And I agree with Muna, having approaching the difficult or the resistant learner is a nice subheading under one of them. If there was some subgroup who could just be in charge of making sure that all the little strings are going, however many people that takes, 2 or 3 or 4, and then they could be the clearinghouse for doling out assignments. So I would propose that as a working structure. And being, again, at a distance, I'm happy to take assignments, but it's really hard to be part of the group that sits together, thinks about it, and says, okay, these people are doing this and these people are doing that, and have we gotten this back from this group? So there needs to be like a central committee. That would be what I would ask for.
Great. Thanks for sharing, Susan. I'm going to ask you a quick question, Susan, just as a follow-up. Do you think it would work to actually have, within those subgroups, to have someone who steps up and takes the lead?
Oh, that's a great idea. Yeah, so like a 2-layer, yeah, that's a great modification to have the sort of the central group making sure each of the 5 segments are going, and then a leader within each of those 5. That's a great suggestion.
Great, thank you. Great. Other thoughts?
Can you, excuse me, can you explain more what you mean by needs assessment?
So as part of the curriculum development process, doing both a general and a targeted needs assessment to see if there's actually a need for something like we're trying to develop, which is the guidelines. And so does that involve reviewing the literature? Does that involve surveying educators? Some of this work has actually already been done. And so looking at that to see if there's a need to do even another needs assessment, or just running with the momentum that's already on the ground, that yes, there's a need for this. Educators are, they're developing a variety of curricula, some of which are great, many of which are not. Is there a way that we can standardize it? And so that's where the needs assessment comes.
Okay, thank you.
How many people do we have in this group?
We have 16 members of the COP.
So practically speaking, we're looking at about 3 people per, 2 or 3 per topic or per subhead portion of that structure.
So if we decide on 4 subgroups, yes, it would be about 3 to 4, depending on how many subgroups we come up with. So I see a need for at least a 5th subgroup, so it might end up being 3.
Yeah,
So would it make
Susan? I know Susan was there was another voice.
Yeah, my question was just, would it make sense to send around a what are you interested in, and then have people put their 1, 2, 3 choices?
Excellent suggestion. That was coming up in the next slide. I love it.
Oh.
We have,
before we do that, more description of what each of these subgroups encompasses. Because, I look at the words outcomes and evaluation. I'm not sure what the overlap is there, but you most likely have distinct ideas in mind.
Great point. We'll be sure to share that so people can make an informed decision.
Good.
Okay, I'm going to move you. Sorry, who's that?
I was just going to say, similarly, educational strategies versus implementation. Again, there seems to be overlap in these categories, but if you could just define them, then we'll be more secure in what the language actually means.
Sure. Good point.
Thank you.
Okay, if you could take your slides all the way down to the very last, which is slide 16, and that's the next steps and tentative schedule. So this is quite an ambitious schedule, and echoing what Mamuna said, we think it'll take a year, but it might end up taking a year and a half, 2 years. But at least we're starting somewhere. And so if you could just take a minute or two just to review the dates and the tasks and share thoughts, questions, concerns, other suggestions for things to consider that aren't on this slide that we should be thinking about. And I'll say that this was adapted from a manual on developing clinical practice guidelines, and so it doesn't have to be. We can adapt it since these are educational guidelines for developing.
So the groups, this is Felice. A question of how the subgroups correspond to the timeline here, where I see literature search assignments. So I'm trying to figure out how will each subgroup do its own literature search assignment based on
their area of focus? Yes.
But the area of focus, so how would you do so you would search for methods and educational strategies, and that would be your lit search, and then the needs assessment group would be on other, like just reviewing the literature for other needs assessments?
Exactly. You would become the subject matter expert specifically for educational strategies in teaching social determinants of health, or implementation and teaching methods, or whatever it is.
And now outcomes are like what outcome measures people have used when studying their educational strategies?
Yes.
Or what people have found?
What people
are you looking for outcome measures or results, essentially?
Outcome measures.
Okay. So, because that's very similar to methods. Like, I guess so like someone else sort of said, maybe a little bit more clarity. So like, is methods what the methods people have used in studying their educational strategies, or what methods have people used to teach social determinants
really great
of health?
Question. So I will tell you that my understanding, because this came from the notes each group did during our conference. So if you remember, we had 3 different groups. Not everyone got a chance to present, but my understanding from that specific group on their flip chart was by methods they meant specifically teaching methods. So what teaching methods are you using in your SDOH curriculum? Teaching methods or teaching strategies, same thing. So not looking, in that case, at outcomes. Outcomes would be something different.
That's helpful. Go ahead.
So that should say teaching methods, not methods, probably.
Exactly.
Okay.
This is Erin Goss.
Hi, Erin.
Go ahead. Oh, okay. So I think that one of the things that I heard earlier on was that a couple people said that they liked the building blocks of SDH education that Megan Rich had put together with the foundational, practice, community level, and policy level. I think that is a very different structure than doing needs assessment, teaching methods, educational outcomes, evaluation. But if you think about each of those, 10 building blocks, each of those is going to have its own methods or teaching methods or teaching outcome or evaluation. And so I think that's one of the things that we've been struggling with as a group is that this topic is a very large topic. How do we do one, set of guidelines that covers everything in SDH, or do we use the building blocks and then for example, community assets and resources, go back to that structure of how do you do a needs assessment of community assets and resources? What teaching strategies do you do for this building block? What educational outcomes would you expect for this building block? How would you evaluate this piece of the building block? So that's my thought.
This is Sarah. I kind of agree with that. I'm sort of struggling with something that Felice said as well, which is, so when I think of putting together guidelines, the first place my mind goes is the AAMC, achieving health equity, how academic medicine is addressing the social determinants of health. That was their sort of guidelines or a collection of important studies and viewpoints published in 2016. But the AAMC Achieving Health Equity PDF is huge and it's very broad, right? So, it covers everything from, QI to social justice to partnering to equity research among veterans. It's very, very broad. Medical legal partnerships, all that stuff. So it kind of gives a broad overview of social determinants of health. So I see this group, tell me if I'm barking up the wrong tree, but I see this group as specifically, number one, addressing educational techniques, educational overarching objectives, and how to meet those objectives. Is that right? Am I close? Am I off?
You are very close, Sarah. The challenge, and I appreciate all the questions you guys have raised because I've been grappling with it over the past couple of months as I think about this huge project we're trying to embark on. Is there's so many different learner groups and so many different educators with the needs. Where do we start? Because everyone's need is somewhat urgent, right? The National League of Nursing just put out their statement, and there's a need there. Do we try to incorporate all the building blocks for one set of learner group? Ambitious, yes. Can we do it? Maybe over a few years, or do we go even smaller and be truly focused? Balancing the need with what is achievable in a reasonable amount of time is our challenge and what we need to decide on. And we don't have to decide today, but I think these questions are helpful for us to kind of just narrow and be realistic about what is feasible.
So I guess this is, oh, sorry.
No, you can finish your thought.
Okay, sorry. So this is Felice. I guess what I'm thinking is if you're trying to figure out a way to cut up the pieces of a literature search pie, then there are other ways to divide the work up than the ones that are there, in my mind. So I didn't make, like when you listed the subgroups, it wasn't clear that the function of these subgroups was to divide up the work of a literature search that would then, become, which would be translated into recommendations and guidelines. And so I think that's, because I think that I remember the discussion, the brainstorming discussion, and when those subgroup suggestions came up, I'm not sure that was the context. I don't think people thought they were making suggestions about how to divide up the jobs in a literature search.
So the subgroup.
This.
Anna,
Yeah, I was just going to say that I'm a little. I echo what has already been said about concerns about the division of tasks. I think we need to have a clear picture of the overarching goal. So we're looking for guidelines for teaching, for educating. So then I think to get there, key features need to be the final product, which would be competencies. What are the competencies we expect of students at each level? And then also, and I know that competencies exist already. You've included them in your slides, but I think that should be a guidepost for us as we then look at best teaching methods to achieve the competencies. And these building blocks are beautiful, and each one can become a foci for teaching methods to achieve competencies in those building blocks. To divide it otherwise, it's the way it comes in implementation, et cetera, I think is too granular to provide anything that is useful. So, it's like saying one group off to chop up celery and another group off to chop up onions and another group off to chop up the eggplant. And each group is hungry, but if we're able to get everybody together with some olive oil, then, we might have something to eat at the end of the evening.
Now I'm hungry.
Yeah.
You bring up some really great points. I think competencies, we definitely need to consider that as we develop these. Just to circle back to the question about subgroups. So my vision was that the work is so big, we can't all attack it. It's a bit probably more efficient to divide it up and have specific groups become experts in their task from the beginning to the end, completing the literature search, doing actually writing up their section on this part of the topic, completing the edits, and then the final submission. And so it is a bit like you were saying, yes, some people are in charge of the salary, but they're going to be great at that salary. They're going to know it inside out. And that's probably going to be a bit more efficient than all of us trying to do everything. Now, the specific subgroups they're not set in stone by any means. And I'd love to get your input as to what you think would be reasonable in terms of just getting a structure of groups who will be working on a particular section and who can do this efficiently and effectively.
This is Susan again. I think that's where, at the beginning, I was asking for sort of a subcommittee to look at the overall structure, because it's hard to do on the phone and have people bat around, 3 or 4 people who are in the same location bat around how you divide up the pie and then send the descriptors out. That's hard. It was hard to do in the large brainstorming session. It's also hard to do on the phone, but a smaller group might be able to make more headway. and then once it's divided, then we could divvy into our section of interest, or at least have a concrete proposal. And I guess I thought that proposal was there. Maybe it isn't quite clear enough. The needs assessment methods, simplification, maybe that's not clear enough that that's the subdividing, but to have the categories divvied out and then build the expert groups in each division.
So are you recommending a subgroup of the COP members or a different group who decide on the section?
Well, just somebody a few people to sit together and say, here are the sections of what we want to write, A, B, C, D, and E, and define them as clearly as possible. And then if we come back, and then if everyone agrees to them, then we can divide up the work. Listening to everybody, I'm not sure. I thought that was maybe done, but I guess it's not quite done, because on the slide that says structure, there were a lot of questions.
Yeah, the structure aspect was one of the questions for the brainstorming session, and these were the suggestions raised. But it looks like there's different ideas, and I appreciate that. What I don't want to do is to force ideas on our group. I love that our group is have different skill sets and expertise, and I'd love to tap into those skill sets and expertise. And so I would really hate to get an outside group to tell us what to do. So is there a way that we 16 can, whether it's, by the listserv or an email thread or another conference call, decide on whether it's all 16 of us or those who are truly interested, maybe a handful, 4 or 5, to sit down together and hash this out?
I think it'd be easier for a smaller group to build a proposal. That's just...
I think I agree.
A smaller group of the COP members or a different group?
No, a smaller group of the COP members.
Great.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know what this other group would be, or who would that other group be.
I mean, interesting to my ear, there was considerable concordance in what people threw out as possible structure for the project. Just the 4 or 5 of us that made suggestions, there was a great deal of overlap. People seemed to be on the same page. Did others hear that as well?
Hi, this is Erin. I certainly did. I unfortunately I don't know people's names by the sound of their voice, but I had suggested perhaps dividing our guidelines by the building blocks. Someone else had suggested dividing them by competencies. I see those two as being very similar ideas, because I think hopefully whatever this end up structure looks like would reflect what we want our learners to be able to be competent in. So those two are very similar in my mind.
Great. It sounds like there's a motivated subgroup already here. I don't want to volunteer anyone, but we'll send out an email, and hopefully we can get a small subgroup together and get working on coming up with what we all agree would be reasonable sections, and then get started on the work. Is there any, I like that. Erin, I'm gonna just put you down, and a few other names right here, but I'd love for, just look out for that email and feel free to share your thoughts. There'll be, if you can share additional thoughts, even outside of what we've talked about, it would definitely help towards coming to a consensus. So our schedule is, as I said, tentative, and it's just an outline. We will definitely tweak it as we go along, but I think the next few weeks will be really important in getting things moving. Sound good?
That sounds great.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yep. Thanks.
Thank you, guys. In the interest of time, I know we have 9 more minutes. Just quick updates on the webinars, blogs, and education collection. Thank you for sharing, Susan, about the education collection already. Webinars have been going great. We're looking forward to Elizabeth giving her webinar in September. Blogs have been outstanding. I've been so impressed with the quality and the content. Thank you, everyone who's been able to share their thoughts in the blogs. I know it's well read, and please continue to push it out through your different networks so we can spread the word. And then the final is open forum for any questions, comments, and then a wrap up. Burning questions?
Nope.
Oh, I have a question. Have you made any decisions about what the research projects will be for next year?
Oh, this is Lauren. I can chime in for that. So we were hoping that HRSA, so just to quickly summarize how that works, we submit 4 proposals to HRSA and they pick 2 for each year. So we submitted them early, hoping that they would have picked, since the new year starts July 1st, but there is some snafu in the process. So they have not picked yet, but we're hoping to know what the 2 moving forward will be in the next 3 weeks. So if anyone is interested in getting involved with the research projects, I can chat with Mabola and we can send out descriptions of what we submitted, or I can just follow up once we know which 2 are picked to move forward.
So this is Anna Lila, and I'm definitely interested.
Great. Anna Leila, I'll reach out to you, and if anybody else is interested, just let me or Mabola or Claire know, and I'll reach out with more details.
I'm sorry, what are we reaching out for?
Well, I didn't quite, was that Mamuna? This is for the 2 research projects that we'll move forward with in year 4. HRSA still has to decide which 2 we're going to move forward with. So we're just waiting for them.
Okay.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for giving us this hour out of a beautiful afternoon, at least here in Chicago. I look forward to continuing this conversation by email or a listserv. I love that it's been spirited. I love the energy, love the momentum, and I know that this will translate into really important work that's needed out there.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.